and along with the Sentinel, the co-hosts of tonight's event are Impact Monadnock Business Ambassadors and Impact Monadnock, which are projects of Monadnock United Way. And the Pandemic Parenting Series in the Sentinel, which has been ongoing for the past 5 months or so, is funded through a grant from the Solutions Journalism Network. So we thank them as well for making both our solutions journalism possible, and by extension, taking our journalism kind of off the written page and into the virtual meeting space here tonight. And so with that, just a few logistics here. I guess, first of all, I should have started by introducing myself by saying I am Jack Rooney. I'm a staff writer at the Keene Sentinel, primarily covering education and business, and have been the lead reporter on the staff side for the Pandemic Parenting Series. And we are thrilled to be able to offer this first of 3 virtual community listening sessions, the theme of which is survival, heal thyself. And to kick things off for us, we have Beth Ann Klaus. Beth Ann is the Executive Director of MAPS Counseling Services, and as well works as a licensed clinical social worker and a child family therapist out of their Keene office. She is also a mother of 2 daughters, 10 and 13, and specializes in working with children and families who have experienced trauma and need to reestablish safety and a sense of security. And so Beth Ann is going to offer a short presentation, but before that, I will just say 2 things. I think everyone at the moment is on mute, and I will mute myself just as soon as Beth Ann gets going as well. If we could all remain muted while she is presenting. And then if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will be monitoring that as we go along. If there's something that's relevant to what Beth Ann is saying, I might jump in and pause if it's something that's, we could address right then. If not, we will have plenty of time by design for questions and answers at the end. So with that, Beth Ann, thank you for being here, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jack, and the rest of the folks at the Keene Sentinel and the folks who sponsored this event. It's so important to keep having good conversations and to keep talking about the reality that this year has been hard. I'll share with you towards the end that we talk about self-care, but self-care is just sometimes another task to do, right? It's like oh, right, I'm supposed to take care of myself too. So we hopefully coming to these conversations relieves a little bit of that pressure and allows us to take care of one another rather than feeling like it's our job to always do all the things. So I do have a little presentation that I pulled together with some thoughts, and I guess I'll go ahead and share it, and for the purpose of it being recorded and whatnot, but I do really love to echo what Jack already said, conversation style. So I'm looking forward to some of those Q&A and just dialogue as we move throughout the rest of the evening. So as a clinician, my skill set is not always tech, but I think I can do this. Let's see here already. I think it worked. Okay, so parenting in a pandemic. What are we talking about tonight? We are talking about managing stress and seeking connection. That's the focus that I want to focus on. So newsflash, everybody, the CDC did this long, complicated study over the last year while we've been living through a pandemic, and they've told us that, as of March, that chronic stress is bad for us, that it's difficult. This is not really news, by the way, for those who don't know me, the sarcasm. Of course, this chronic stress is bad for us. We've been talking about this for decades in the clinical field, that chronic stress can negatively affect our physical and mental health, both for children and for parents, especially without the social economic supports that could contribute to the widening of educational and health disparities. So it's been a hard year, and it's taking a toll on all of us. So the language that you see here on the screen are quotes from an article that is referenced at the bottom in the study that was done, but it says for those who've been shifting in their parenting because of children being home for virtual instruction, they're reporting that they're having more emotional stress, difficulty sleeping, being concerned about work, concerns about job security, childcare challenges, conflict with working and providing childcare, all of these things, that this is harder for folks who are doing virtual education with their children at home than it is for parents who are sending their children off to school. Okay, this is okay, yep, knew that. And that parents who are having even the kids with hybrid are also reporting that this is tough. So I'm so glad that the CDC has shared what we who are here tonight know. It's been a hard year and it's taken a toll on us. So let's talk for a few minutes about stress. Stress and our survival instincts are actually good. It's a healthy part about our humanity that we are wired to survive. We are wired to manage stress and to use that to build strength and to overcome obstacles. So our survival instincts keep us safe, that we react based on the stress that's in our environment, and we do what we need to ensure that we survive. And that we can actually become stronger and we gain new skills. Who's learned a few new skills this year during a pandemic because of the stress and the necessity of the situation required that we learned something new, that we adapted and grew out of that. So that's great. I'm so grateful for the stress of the last year. Not entirely, but I tried to be. And I just want to at least acknowledge that at the core, stress is not a bad thing, that it is something that actually is helpful and useful, and that I'm so grateful for survival instincts and all the alarm bells that go off that help us to act and respond and take care of what we need. But there are times when the stress response goes wrong, that we can become sensitized and we start reacting to everything, or we become desensitized and we get numb and overwhelmed. So if you are anything like me and have a house that you're living in right now, there are moments, sometimes in the day-to-day, it's not necessarily for me weeks or months at a time, but you go into one of these two categories, right? There's like all of a sudden you just feel on edge and everything's bothering you. And then there's these other times that you're just like, I just don't have another ounce to care. And so you become numb and overwhelmed. So here's a few images. Are you this guy? Do you bark at everything? Can't go wrong that way, right? Like you're just like on edge, and you think, is there something wrong with me? Or you're just barking at everything because everything seems scary and overwhelming. Or that's the oversensitized. Or maybe you're a little bit more like the superheroes that are just doing things all the time. And then someone's calling like, oh, there's another emergency. And you're like, listen, pal, they're all emergencies, right? Like, I'm just going to sit here by the pool and drink my Coolada or whatever I have, and hopefully it will feel better. So this is when the stress response goes a little awry, where we either get over agitated and react to everything, or we no longer can attend to what's going on around us because we just can't keep reacting with that level of intensity. So how do we manage stress? This is some of the language that I'll offer tonight is from a book that came out over the last year or so from a group of sisters, Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They wrote a book called Burnout, and it's the secret to unlocking the stress cycle. So what they talk a lot about is about this lie that we've all been told, that if we can manage the list, if we can get all the things done that we think we have to do, that then we'll be able to breathe better, that if we manage the stressors, that then the stress will disappear. And that's just simply not true. Stress itself is different from stressors because stress, like all emotions, are physical, biological events. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they have to be experienced. They can't be rationalized away. We can't checkbox them away. The stress that we have experienced over this last year, we have to let ourselves complete the cycle of that stress. So how do we complete the cycle? Think about why stress happens, right? Stress says danger, danger, the alarm bells go off. And so going all the way back to caveman times where there was a threat of danger, a lion attacks you, and everyone's stress response triggers. They join their efforts together. They attack the lion. They overcome the stress. There's a chase. There's the battle. All of that happens. And then they go back to the campfire and they have a feast and they are laughing and they're talking and they breathe again, and their bodies know, I'm safe again. I'm okay. So that's the part of completing the stress cycle. That's getting to the end of the stressful situation and returning to a sense of, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm with people who love me, I am loved, and I can move on. So if we are experiencing chronic stress, we've got kind of this backlog in our system. So sometimes we have to be extra intentional about doing more of these things. Scientists have actually indicated that we have to do intentional completing of the stress cycle for about 20 minutes at minimum each day to manage normative stress. So under the levels of stress that we've been experiencing in this last year, we actually have to complete more than 20 minutes of active exercise or active activities to complete our stress cycle and relieve some of that energy. So how do we do that? Here are 7 things that are listed in the Nagoski sisters book about ways that we can complete the stress cycle. Moving. Physical activity, without question, is the #1 way that we can release some of that energy and de-stress our bodies. Breathing, deep breathing. When we're super stressed, we go into short, like tiny breaths, hyperventilate. We're just kind of like survival breathing. Deep breathing expands your entire lung cavity, stretches your diaphragm, and calms your sympathetic and your nervous system. So those deep breaths of actually intentionally breathing deeply all the way to your toes does beautiful work. Lowers your blood pressure, which slows your heart rate. All those things that say, oh, I'm calm now, right? You can't take super deep breaths when you're in the middle of a big run, but you can take those deep breaths when you're safe. Talking to people casually is the 3rd thing. This is like casual chit chat. It's hard to be super stressed if you are casually chatting with someone. So that's like over your cup of coffee. When you're stressed, you're in your bubble. You're overstimulated, right? You're sensitized to the world, so you don't even want to have a conversation. When we are allowed to just have those casual conversations, it's one of the ways that our body gets triggered of like, oh, I'm safe now. I can release some of this stress. Laughing is another one. There's not a lot of things to laugh about sometimes, but there's also a lot of things that you can choose to laugh about. And you can choose to do things with a group of friends or with your children that help you to have like that deep belly laugh. Hopefully, at least all of us have had some of those moments where we've laughed so hard that we cry, and then you feel so much better, right? The stress just starts to fade. Speaking to loved ones is another one. So this is the like feeling really close to someone, combination between kind of physical activity of moving and speaking to loved ones is a recommendation to engage in 20-second hugs. When was the last time that you stood and hugged someone for 20 seconds? When you stand and embrace someone that you know that long, you know that you're safe, right? Your blood pressure lowers, your heart rate lowers, your breathing regulates, because you know that you're close and connected and you can feel safe. Crying is a good relief. Doesn't have to actually be about a thing. You can be really upset about something that makes you want to cry, but then go watch a totally different movie that takes you through the whole stress cycle and you weep at it. You feel better when you let yourself have a good cry. So I encourage people to do that. And then doing something creative. Wonderful way to complete the stress cycle of taking all of that energy that's built up inside of us and doing something that's creative. So I offer these to us tonight because this is about we can't control the environment that we're in. We can't stop the pandemic from happening, even though thankfully there seems to be some hope at the end of the tunnel. But we can manage the stress. Managing the stress is different from managing the stressors, and it gives us the opportunity to take care of ourselves and attune to what our bodies need to get through this, regardless of the fact that we can't control the environment around us. So the Nagoski sisters recommend that the next step after managing your stress is planful problem solving and positive reappraisal, which keeps your monitor satisfied. Monitor is language that they use around that thing inside of us that says, why should I keep trying, right? This pandemic has been on for 14 months. I'm still doing some of the same stuff. Why do I keep trying to find things to laugh, find ways to be creative? So we need to sometimes adjust our expectations and say, of course, it's good to keep trying. So sometimes that means tweaking things a bit and making them a little fun, more casual, shifting our expectations of what does a vacation mean instead of just being disappointed and I am not going to get to go on this trip. Okay, well, what can I do? I can camp out in the backyard. I can learn how to bake new things. Who's tried a new recipe over the last 14 months and realized how much fun it is to bake with your children again and to not be stressed about them throwing the flour or spilling the oil, because who cares? The goal was we're here to bake and have fun and do something creative. So adjusting our expectations for how we spend our time, what does vacation look like, what does family evening time look like, all of that helps us to adjust that monitor and say, we got to keep trying, keep doing, keep living, and making the best of the situation that we're in. So I just put this little reminder at the bottom about being kind to yourself. We are the worst as parents, and women especially, speak for myself, at having so many expectations and being critical. So just try to be kind to yourself and each other and, and adjust some of those expectations. I'm going to pause and take a sip of water. Yeah, just make sure that was the next one. So stress and stress hormones, cortisol, or there's hormones in our bodies that are fine and can become toxic. So oxytocin is the antidote to that. Oxytocin is the best protective layer that we can build in ourselves and in our children. It actually literally builds an insulated layer over our neurons in our brain that help to tolerate cortisol and other stress hormones. So oxytocin is a really cool thing. So oxytocin is what some people call the love hormone, because we fire off this hormone in our bodies when we are doing the things that make us feel loved. So it's the hormone that people feel when they're nursing their babies, when they are in a close embrace with someone who they love. So physical touch, words of encouragement, listening to someone else, all of smiling and laughing, meditating and praying, exercise, crying, giving to someone else, getting creative, having a pet. I think that you're going to hear in a few minutes about a pandemic puppy, right? This is something that we all craved in the midst of the stressful year of the pandemic, of wanting to have more love around us. And so that was our craving for oxytocin, of wanting to have more of those things that created this insulated layer that said, this is going to help me get through and tolerate the stress of this pandemic. So I wrote down here, sound familiar, because of course, these oxytocin things are the same as completing the stress cycle. The things that we do, we're trying to create that oxytocin because that's like, okay, I'm safe again. Completes that stress cycle and helps to insulate our brains and it helps us to tolerate the stress of this current world we're living in. So oxytocin, the love hormone, it's about connection, right? So connection that is possible when we feel safe. And if we've managed our own stress, we are significantly better equipped to help our children manage their stress. So this caring for ourselves or managing our stress cycle is the gift that we can give ourselves so that we're better equipped to sit alongside of our kiddos. So what do they need right now? They need connection over isolation. When our child starts showing signs of stress, don't let them say like, oh, work it out on your own, go do some art. Okay, that's good, doing art, but find ways to connect with them in their stress and with the other people around you that are stressed. That might look like saying, I'm here with you. We, not just you, we are going to get through this. I'd like to stay here with you and make sure that you're safe while you're feeling so upset. So just choosing to be with and connect with our children is a gift. And it's something that we are much better equipped to do if we have managed some of our own stress. Again, not managing the stressors, but managing the stress in our own bodies. So, and as we think about how do we connect, I just wanted to offer a little reminder in here for folks around the beautiful gift of empathy and how empathy fuels connection. This is some language that I borrowed from Brene Brown, and she describes empathy as perspective taking. What has this been like for you? We think we understand what this pandemic has been like for everyone because we've lived through it too, but everyone's experience is different. So take their perspective, try to stay out of a judgment seat, recognize the emotion of the people around you, be willing to feel with another person and avoid silver linings, right? Brene likes to say that rarely does empathy ever start with the phrase at least. Sometimes we say, well, at least it's springtime now, as if that makes it somehow magically better that the last 12 months haven't been torturous. If someone's feeling really crappy, let them feel crappy. If you're feeling really crappy, let yourself have that feeling. That's part of how we complete the stress cycle of just letting ourselves feel and have the moment that we're in. And accept that we can't always make things better. Sometimes we keep trying to live as if we're not in a pandemic. We are in a pandemic. A good friend of mine talks about how this is a time to celebrate our resilience and to be able to acknowledge how much we have lived through and how we have endured and how powerful our children and we are as families, and the evidence is in our resilience. So the last quote I want to leave you with tonight is again from Emily and Amelia Nagoski, but it talks about the cure for burnout, like what's going to help us to get through this. It cannot just be self-care. It has to be all of us caring for each other. So that's a shift in perspective of, yes, put on the oxygen mask first and keep working hard to find ways to care for each other and be that community that gathers around the fire pit and acknowledges each other's feelings, connects with one another, whether it's your family unit or your social circle, but finding ways to care for one another. Let yourself be cared for, which is sometimes hard for some parents because you think it has to all fall on your shoulders. And I think that that's what's going to get us through. So, end of presentation. Pass the baton back to Jack.
Well, thank you so much, Beth Ann. That was, I think, very informative for me and really, really interesting. And we are going to begin to transition a little bit more into the Q&A section. And before we do that, I will just say it looks like we do have a pretty small group here tonight. So if you don't want to put a question in the chat, if you would rather speak up and ask that, I think that would be totally fine. If there's a way, I think you can, in the reactions, you can indicate that you'd like to raise your hand or like to speak, just so that we don't end up speaking over each other. But I don't think it would be necessary to necessarily put your question in the chat as we get to that. So just want to make sure that this is, an open and a helpful conversation for everyone. So with that, we do also have here with us Emily Hall Warren, who is going to share her perspective a little bit as just being a mother, being a parent in the pandemic. Emily works as the Director of Administration at the W.S. Badger Company, and she is also a mother of 3 boys, 8-year-old twins and an 11-year-old son. And I will, just turn it over to you, Emily, to share a little bit about your experience with pandemic parenting and how you have found ways to take care of yourself.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you, Beth Ann, for your perspectives. I don't know if I'm in the best position to share how I found ways to take care of myself personally, given that I woke up this morning and turned over in bed and said to my husband, I'm so overwhelmed today. It's just in and out of that feeling for the last year. And I personally have gone through all the stages during this pandemic that everyone else has gone through, starting with sort of a really ambitious teaching schedule in March of last year, project-based learning that I had decided to do with my children, which was immediately followed in a couple of weeks later by basically daily crying on my part. We've gone through a stage of binging Netflix and having long video game playing sessions from the kids' perspective. As Beth Ann mentioned earlier, we did end up adopting a dog during the pandemic, which is I think it's a theme for people, this pandemic puppy sort of thing. And so when I was thinking about what has self-care meant for me and how to take care of myself during stress, I had some ideas, but I also felt like I needed to reach out to other parents, friends and family, and get some of their perspectives as well. One of the things I was thinking about in this conversation was how my children are here. John, I need you to be quiet, okay? How the idea, I really appreciated, Beth Ann, in your presentation, how the idea of stress reduction and self-care wasn't based on activities in particular or actions, but more on connection, because it's really have felt during this last year the feeling of how privileged we are to be living in this area and have open access to outdoor space to be safe in, but also how access to resources, even just having a partner in a family, can really provide so much more opportunity for people to stay healthy during this period of time. So I would say that for me personally, one of the best things that I've done is to adopt a puppy, because that has given me both this additional connection, Oxycontin. Is that what it is? No, that's a Oxytocin. What's the technical term?
Oxytocin is the hormone.
Oxytocin, yes.
Oxycontin would be a street drug. We don't want to offer that on.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. No.
It's also a prescribed medication, but anyway, oxytocin is what we want.
But also the opportunity to the building into my day the necessity to get outside and actually move, to walk the dog, and have this period of time every morning and night where it's 20 minutes or half an hour where I'm physically moving, and I also have time to just be in my head and not be having to interact or manage or take care of someone else, has been really healthy and wonderful for me. Some of the other things that my coworkers have said that they have done to help themselves is that they have exercised. One that I loved was teach my kid more practical life skills, like how to wash dishes, do the laundry, split and stack wood, etc. All of these help our family in the end, even though it's work up front, it will pay off in the back end. Plus, it's rewarding to teach your kids new skills. I thought that was lovely. One person said, learn guitar. Another one said, focus on stretching and massaging. Foam rolling. I actually got my first ever massage last week. So people trying new things to help control their stress. And one person said started a long past due savings account. So I love that. And then had another feedback from a coworker is that I had sent an email that said, tell me what you're doing to take care of yourself. And she said, I wanted to write you over the weekend, but my boundary that I set was to not check my work email. So I didn't. And then she said, I focused on my family. I worked in the garden and played outside. It was lovely to free myself from the need to look at work and to be able to keep myself in check and not get so easily frustrated. And then I wrote an email to the moms, my mom friends, asking them to start up having a safe outside in-person meetup again, which always fills my cup back up. And then finally she said, I decided to take some time off and plan for lake time this summer. So all sorts of wonderful ideas from people that I know about how to care for yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. I think that's a great way to go about it, just crowdsourcing, ideas for how to survive all of this. Because I think that's the point of events like tonight. I think that's where the power of these sorts of things lie, is just being able to share experiences and feel seen and heard, and know that other people are going through exactly what you're going through. So,
and certainly the fact that no one person feels like they've nailed it, creates that connection of knowing that we're all going through the same experience and having good days, but also hard days as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I want to now, I guess, more fully open it up to questions, and it looks like we do have a few here in the chat. So I'll start with this first one from Terry. Beth Ann, I don't know if you can read that as well. I'll read it out just for the recording as well, in case the chat doesn't show up. But Terry said, Beth Ann, your comment on staying away from quote unquote silver linings was interesting. I think this goes almost double for grandparents who watch their adult children deal with so much. I'm interested in whether there are things we should be telling our adult children in order to be helpful.
That's a great question. I think that the comment about silver linings is, I think that we often want to tell people how to look on the bright side, right? How to anticipate that it could be worse, right? Because sometimes that shift of perspective we think is somehow going to be a gift to them. But most of the time it's usually a gift for ourselves, because if we can tell someone that their situation's really not that bad, then we don't have to worry too much about them. And what a tough place to be for grandparents that are watching their adult children struggling to figure out how to manage work and their children, and maybe they're close enough that you could help, but you can't because you're not allowed to have close contact with them, and or maybe they're far away. And so there's this hard situation that you want to make better, and we can't. So my recommendation is, instead of thinking about what do we want to tell our adult children, is how do we keep showing up to let them know that they're not alone in their experience, and to give space for them to share. I think we all have been craving having people just listen to us when we're feeling really overwhelmed and upset, whether that's to listen to your adult children complain about their day and, oh my gosh, the teacher emailed me about why my kids still didn't get their work done, and like, have they been in my house and seen what's going on? And they just need to feel heard and seen, and that in itself, that empathy, acknowledgement, validation for, wow, that's really hard. Yeah, oh my gosh, tell me this and tell me more stories. Like, oh, I can be with her anyway. You want me to Zoom with one of your kids? Let me know how I can help. Of just acknowledging their experience and accepting what they're saying, rather than trying to ease them by helping it feel better.
Yeah, that's really great, and I completely agree that there's often great power in commiseration. We do have another question in the chat that was actually something I was curious about too. If Beth Ann, you had any specific advice here, and I'll read the specific question, which is, what advice would you give to a single parent having to do it all right now, when there sometimes doesn't feel like there is even time to shower? how do you find the time for self-care?
Preach. Yeah, not having time to shower. We all remember that, whether that's with newborns or in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah, I don't know that I have advice. I want to start with what I just preached in the answer to the last question. Single parenting in a pandemic is hard enough. Single parenting, just super, super hard. Because you can't pass the baton. So maybe you can do a little bit about what Emily, some of her folks were telling her about finding ways to empower their kids to be more independent and self-sufficient and teaching them the life skills. Awesome. But I would say to a single parent, be kind to yourself, adjust your expectations, celebrate your resilience that you have gotten this far with your kiddos, and find ways that you can to let yourself cry, let yourself laugh, let yourself go for a walk or a hike. And your kids are saying, I don't want to. Well, that's what mama needs right now. So we're going on a hike because you need that physical activity. So finding ways to incorporate the things that you need and bringing your kids along with you instead of always letting them drive the train. Because sometimes they'll say, but I want to do this and I want to do that. And our instinct is to kind of cater to their needs. And so letting ourselves say, my needs matter too. And so I need you to like watch this movie for the next hour and a half so that I can go take a shower. But that's okay. That you can be like, bubble bath time, mom's off duty, whatever it is. I don't know how old the kids are for a single parent, but I think just finding ways to tune in to what do I need right now and giving yourself permission to do that thing, even if it means bringing your kids along with you, if at all possible. But there's not an easy answer, and single parenting is really tough anytime, but especially in a pandemic when you can't recruit the neighbor and everyone else because you can't have anyone in your house and you can't share the duties. So
Can I jump in for a second? I really can't even imagine. I really feel like how difficult that must be to be single parenting right now. And one of the conversations I had with a lot of my parent friends at the beginning of the pandemic, specifically around screen time, was, is it okay to change our expectations during this period of time, which is so out of the norm? And I don't know what the experts would say about that, but certainly as a parent, I came to the conclusion that it absolutely was okay. And if I had one pretty strict rule about screen time pre-pandemic, it wasn't gonna fly when the kids were home for all day, every day with, 1 or 2 hours of schoolwork like it was in the spring. And maybe I'm just reassuring myself, but I feel like kids are really resilient and they adjust to the circumstances, and that knowing that they're loved and safe is more important than limiting necessarily screen time, particularly if that's going to give you the ability to show them that they're loved and safe. And so I would say be gentle with yourself.
yeah, bravo. Well said, Emily. And yes, science actually shows that kids are resilient. And I haven't seen any evidence to indicate that children are going to have long-term harm because during a pandemic they have extra screen time. And especially if it means having a parent who feels sane and able to laugh with them 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we have another question in the chat, and I feel like none of these questions have easy answers, but that's why we're asking them. And so the question here in the chat, and I would encourage too, if anyone even in the audience here who has joined us has thoughts on this too, I would encourage you to either put them in the chat or to raise your hand and speak up, because I think this is another one where crowdsourcing would be valuable. So the specific question here is, are there any good ways to meet new people and expand your parenting friend circle in a time when get-togethers are rare?
I hear someone tapping and it sounds like the crickets because yeah, where the heck do you go right now? Any good ways to meet people? Emily, do you have an idea?
Outside.
Hmm.
I mean, so I think one of the things that has been the most amazing to me during this last year is watching how quickly my children adjusted to mask wearing and how easy it was for them compared to the adults in my life. So I see them now on the playground wearing masks all day long, being kids, and that feels really wonderful. So this idea of having outdoor, I had a meeting of my book group outdoor around a fire pit. We're New Englanders, we know how to dress. I would say have a play date in the park and have a picnic, order pizza to the park, do something outside with a mask on.
Yeah, I don't know. I love that. I think that a lot of us have adjusted to a lot more outdoor activities and outdoor gatherings. I think that it's been one of the things that I certainly have valued a lot as in my own life is the opportunities that I've been able to gather with people outside to connect with the people that I already knew. I don't know that I'm rereading Annika's question here about meeting new people and expanding your parenting circles. Like, I feel like it's about maintaining and survival right now. It's hard for me to imagine trying to build a brand new relationship with someone in the midst of a pandemic. But there are some, Facebook chat groups. If your kid is connected with a certain school group, a lot more people have kind of connected with one another by responding to issues or engaging in conversations. There's online forums like this that some more and more people are gathering. The library is offering some. So finding ways to still feel connected to people outside of your home address, I think has been refreshing and refueling to many of us. But there's no magic answer. But.
Yeah, and now, Beth Ann, I want to change gears a little bit and ask maybe a more kind of clinical question because I was interested when I was reading your bio to see that you have a background in working with people who have experienced trauma, and I am curious. I know in what I've read in the media I have consumed on the pandemic. There's certainly a case to be made that this is on some level a collective trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does your experience, your research, your work tell you if we do view the pandemic as a collective societal trauma? What does the research that has been done on responding to that tell us about how we might approach responding to this very big trauma?
Great question. Yes, I agree. It's a collective trauma. What we know about trauma and its impact on us long term is often that we as human beings are equipped because of our stress responses and our trauma responses that are wired in us to survive, right? So we can get through the situation. And that's kind of where we are still. We're in this stress response, we're navigating this new and unknown world, and we're reacting and responding and trying to adjust as best we can to manage to survive. Literally, we have been fighting a virus that's out there trying to kill us, right? That's our kind of the fear that everyone, why we're staying in our bubble, is we're trying to survive. So when the trauma passes, the important part is that return to safety, completing the cycle, resuming a sense of confidence that I know that where I belong, I know that I'm valuable, and I know how to safely navigate my world and get my needs met independently in a relationship with other people. So it's that we're in that wave of like, the time will tell how we as a society adjust to the stress that we've experienced and whether or not we can return to a place of safety and knowing how to navigate our worlds. So one of the other things that's really important about trauma is that trauma impacts us in these lasting, damaging, difficult ways when we get stuck in the trauma event and we are convinced that the world is not safe. When we've been harmed by someone or something, and we are not able to feel safe again, the car accident, that we never feel safe going in the car again. And so then we have this like cyclical loop that danger, danger, I can't get in a car, I can't get in a car, danger. So if we have people, children, ourselves, who are not able to resume connection to other people, to re-engage in the world, to go back out into society wearing the masks, like Emily was talking about how the kids have adjusted and played in the playground and they're just like, this is how we roll. They're saying, I know how to navigate my world. You wear your mask, you use the hand sanitizer, da da da. And that's like signs of, yoo-hoo, making it through the collective trauma, and they're finding their new sense of safety. So are we going to be able to do that as a society? Time will tell as we learn how to manage and care for one another around safety and protection of spread of viruses in the future, because this may not be the only life-threatening virus that will come our way. So I think that that's the focus of, yes, it's a collective trauma. We have the benefit that we're validating it for one another, because trauma is also really damaging when it's denied, right? So when people deny that it happened to you. So we know that this is real. At least most of us know that it's real. And and we are hopefully going to return to a safe sense of safety, that we will again know how to navigate our world in a safe way.
Yeah, well, that's I think really interesting, and I think that's what I was trying to get at too with my question. Was obviously we're still in the middle of this, and still a lot of those kind of instinctual reactions that you talked about. But I also think, as there is that hope on the horizon, people are now starting to think about, okay, it's not going to be flipping a switch and getting back to normal. It's going to be a process. I do, though, want to circle back to a little bit more of the immediacy. And again, this would be one where I would encourage, if anyone else out there in the audience has any thoughts. Emily, you mentioned, getting together outside. And I think I totally agree with you that we are extremely lucky to live in a place like this where there are so many options. And I suppose today's weather and the impending April snowstorm notwithstanding, we are hopefully getting to a point where we can spend more time outside more comfortably. So I guess both Beth Ann and Emily, I'm curious, with your kids specifically, and again, anyone else out there, please feel free to jump in. Where do you go to get outside? Where do you go to spend time outside with your family? And I guess to go more with the theme of the evening too, where do you go outdoors when you need to get away and be by yourself and take care of yourself? Not to totally put you on the spot, but also kind of to put you on the spot.
I just feel like I've been doing a lot of talking, so I want to defer to Emily if she wants to talk first.
I had the pleasure 2 weekends ago of going to Madame Cherie's Forest in Chesterfield and taking that hike with my kids, which is a place I had never been before. It was pretty magical. Hike was a little longer than they anticipated, but we made it through. I'm also lucky enough, I live in Gilsum, so we have a lot of trails around our house. And something that we have done in the past as an outdoor activity, which is so much fun for both me and them, is geocaching, which is sort of like a little treasure hunt. You get an app on your phone, and there's these little, you use your GPS to try to find these little hidden messages that previous geocachers have left. So it sort of gives a purpose to the walk and makes it a little exciting when you're out with your kids.
Actually, Beth Ann, before I turn it over to you, I just want to jump in on that, because Emily, I don't know if you've ever been done the short little hike at Mount Caesar in Swansea, but there's a little geocache plastic box up at the top there. So, and I don't actively seek out those things, but that's one where when I've gone and done that before, just happened upon it. And so I think that's a great little hike to do too. But Beth Ann, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, hiking has been a huge one. I've got a friend who I feel like every time I look on their Instagram page, they're like on another hike or on another ski mountain. So I think a lot of people have tackled new hobbies of hiking, skiing, getting through the winter sports, snowshoeing. Bicycles were sold out for months last summer and fall. So where do I go? I have successfully gotten lost about 5 times on the Drummer Hill trails because they're accessible here in Keene. And depending on where you get them, you can go around Goose Pond and all of these little trails that I guess a bunch of wonderful mountain bikers in our community maintain. But there is not an accurate map on the planet, as far as I know, for those trails. And so every time I go out, I get lost. But it's an adventure. So we know that eventually, if we stay on a path, we'll either come back to a place we recognize, or we'll come out to a road that we'll know how to find our way home again. Sometimes the trip is much longer than expected. There was one night that we weren't sure we were going to make it out in the winter time before dark, because the nights are early. But yeah, just finding new trails, being willing to have an adventure. Now that the warmer weather, certainly looking forward to weather and lake access again, smiling children popping on the screen. And I think that being an a Keene person, I have a few friends who live out of town where have more land, and they've been willing to let us come and like hang out in their yard and have a picnic where everyone kind of like packs their own food and they're over there and you're not really like connected, but because you're outside and you're 10 feet away or a little more from each person, but you're getting to see other humans out in nature. So take advantage of your friends who are willing to let you come over and hang out in their yard. So it's one of the things I've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even with my own Sentinel colleagues, since we're not working in the office, we've been able to, when the weather is nice, trade backyards and who's hosting. So, and then we do have another great suggestion in the chat from Gina saying that we fly kites at the field at the YMCA, which is a great area. It's actually right up by my apartment here in Keene. And just before we wrap up, because we do want to be very conscious of everyone's time, we'll just get to one last question here in the chat from Terry. And he addressed it to both of you, Beth Ann and Emily. And to read it exactly, he said, with so many people, particularly moms, encountering feelings of failure or being overwhelmed, parenting, work, having to teach, do you have advice for businesses to be more helpful on the employment side?
Oh, I want to hear Emily's answer, because Badger is notoriously known for like being a great employer.
Well, Terry, I appreciate that question. And I feel like it's hard for me not to mention a group that I'm involved in, which is Impact Monadnock Business Ambassadors, which is a group of leading businesses in the Keene area who have committed to creating family-friendly policies. And we've found that those family-friendly policies have become more and more important during the pandemic. I would say first and foremost, one of the easiest things that businesses can do that costs nothing as far as benefits go is be as flexible as possible in understanding people's schedules and scheduling needs. So even Badger, which is, at the forefront of good business policy around families, was more conservative pre-pandemic about business working hours. And we've had to say 6 in the morning is fine, 6 at night is fine, 2 in the morning is fine, whatever works for you and is healthy and allows you to maintain a safe home life and continue to work where we can support. So being flexible with your work time, understanding that this is a time-limited event, that people are good employees who are being put in difficult situations, right? and that people may not be as available as they would during normal periods. So
Yeah.
I don't know, Beth Ann, if you have other ideas.
Well, I think that as for businesses are still people. So I think of all the good rules that apply about how to help someone when they're feeling sense of failure, being overwhelmed, is offer empathy, be willing to listen to them, let them be honest and transparent about what's going on. The last thing we want is a bunch of employees who are struggling and not able to share that with you. That's certainly something that we strive really hard at here at MAPS, is creating a safe place where people can acknowledge their own struggles, because when we believe that when we support one another, we're better equipped to be good and effective clinicians with our clients. So giving them space and to feel heard, and to truly listen, to understand and see if there's something that can be done. Offering affirmation, notice when someone is doing something well and being successful, express appreciation. These are just good human skills, but they certainly apply in the workplace when there's so many exactly layers that we are feeling like failure, nothing's as good as it's supposed to be doing. Knowing that someone is noticing and acknowledging when we've done something well is a real gift. So,
as far as concrete policies go, there is a list and template language for family-friendly policies on the Impact Monadnock website, so people can Google that and see the work that this group has done in thinking about how businesses can support the needs of families, both in pandemic and outside of pandemic as well.
Great. Well, and that really leads to what I was going to start to say to wrap up here, as we are approaching 7:30, which is first to thank both of you, Beth Ann and Emily, for joining us, and thank everyone who tuned in, and hopefully everyone who watches the recording of this later on. I hope this has been a valuable conversation for all of you, and for, again, everyone who might be watching this after the fact. I did want to just mention a couple of things real quick. The first is that all of the Sentinel's work on pandemic parenting, the stories that we have written, the links to sign up for these virtual sessions, which I will get to in a minute, the next ones, and the newest addition to that site will be a resource list that myself and Meg McIntyre, the contributing writer who's been working on this project with us, put together. That is now on the website, which is sentinelsource.com/pandemic_parenting. Again, that has all of the stories, the resources, and most importantly, perhaps for the event tonight, the link to sign up for the next in our series of 3 community listening sessions. That will be 1 week from tonight, same time, Thursday evening, April 22nd, 6:30 p.m. The theme for that presentation will be When Homeroom is Home, What's Been Lost During Remote Learning and How to Tell. So I think a topic that is definitely at the top of a lot of parents' minds as we head towards the end of the school year and into the summer. The presenter for that presentation will be Amanda Bastoni, who works at CAST, which is a Boston area-based firm, educational firm. Amanda has a background in career and technical education, as well as working for a company, CAST. Again, next week she will have a presentation, brief presentation similar to tonight, before hopefully getting into another good Q&A session like we had tonight. So with that, I see we are just hitting 7:30. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and hope you can come again next week.